But first, the story of the weekend is the rising tensions in the Middle East after the US killed a senior Iranian general in Iraq. Let's speak to the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, who joins us now from central London. I mean, many people this morning will be very concerned about the possibility of a full-blown conflict, even a war between the US and Iran. Was Donald Trump right to order the killing of Soleimani?
Well, first of all, I share those concerns. We're looking to de-escalate and stabilise the situation. That's something that we've talked about with our European and our American friends. I spoke to the Iraqi Prime Minister just this morning, the Iraqi President last night, and I'll be reaching out to the Foreign Minister of Iran with that same message. You asked about General Soleimani. Let's be very clear. He was a regional menace, and we understand the position that the Americans found themselves in, and they have a right to exercise self-defense. They've explained the basis on which that's done, and we're sympathetic to the situation they found themselves in. But there is a risk with the heightening of tensions, and we now want to see the de-escalation and the stabilisation of the situation. And a war, in fact, is in no one's interest. The only people that would gain would be Daesh and the terrorists that would exploit the vacuum. So we'll be working very hard throughout the diplomatic network with all of our partners, the US, the Europeans, and in the region, to get that message across loud and clear.
You say that the US has a right to self-defense, but the question was about whether Donald Trump was right to order the killing of Soleimani. Was he?
Well, the US will take their own operational judgment call, but they've got the right of self-defense. If you look at what General Soleimani was doing, he's not some victim in this scenario. He was a regional menace. He was in charge of the Quds Force, the wing of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which is directing militias and proxies in the region, in Iraq, in the Lebanon, in Syria, which is destabilizing those countries, trying to get an Iranian advantage and attacking Western countries that are legitimately there. So we understand the position the US were in, and I don't think we should be naive about the Iranian Revolutionary Guard or indeed General Soleimani.
I don't think anyone's trying to paint Soleimani as a good guy in this scenario, but at the same time, the risks of, as you put it, escalation are what people are concerned about. Are you worried that there could be an accidental war here?
Well, I think we need to avoid that, and we need to de-escalate and stabilise the situation. My first concern of the Prime Minister and the government is to make sure we protect UK citizens, forces, our diplomatic missions. All of that planning and preparation is in place. We're working very closely together with our partners to that effect, and it is important, and that's why I was reaching out to the Iraqi Prime Minister this morning, first thing. We'll be talking to other partners today, as I have been since Friday, to make sure we're all clear that de-escalation is necessary and absolutely essential. No one wants, I don't think anyone would benefit from a war in the Middle East. The only people that would benefit would be the terrorists and Daesh in particular. And so we'll be working with all of our partners, US, European partners, and those in the region, to get that message across and to make sure we do manage things down and de-escalate those tensions.
You keep using the word de-escalation. Donald Trump this morning, or this weekend, has said that the US has identified 52 Iranian sites that it will hit if Iran targets Americans or US assets. Does that sound like de-escalation to you?
I think the Americans are trying to send a very clear message to Tehran that they cannot continue the aggressive, menacing behaviour, whether it's on the destabilising activity that General Soleimani was in charge of throughout the region, whether it's on the nuclear front or indeed some of its wider activities, for example, on attacking shipping. But aside from that message, or supplementing that message, we also need to be clear that there is a route through which allows Iran to come in from out of the international cold, and that opportunity is there for them if they do the right things. And so I think, yes, we need to contain the nefarious actions of Iran. We also need to de-escalate and stabilise the situation and make clear that if, after all this time, the leadership in Tehran wish to do the right thing and accept the overtures that have been made, not just from the President of the United States, but also from President Macron, to actually engage in proper diplomacy, meaningful diplomacy, that route is also available. And I think that's an important message.
I mean, there are reports today that you're going to be travelling to Washington next week, to the US next week, and talking to the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Are you going to have a tough message for Mike Pompeo? What are you going to say to him?
Well, I'm meeting with my French and German colleagues next week. I've already been scheduled to go to the US. I'm going to Canada as well. We're reaching out to all of our partners. But look, the Americans, we're very close with them. I spoke to Mike Pompeo on Friday. We've been very clear about the need for de-escalation. I know that's something that the Americans share. But equally,
So do you have a meeting with Mike Pompeo next week?
We're also clear that Iran cannot continue its nefarious activities, whether it's on destabilizing those countries in the Middle East. We need to see Iran come back to full compliance with the JCPOA, the nuclear deal. And we've also, obviously, over the recent months and over the last year, seen increasingly appalling behaviour in relation to dual nationals, not just UK dual nationals, but others in Iran. So across all of this range of behaviour, we want to see, and we share with our European and our American colleagues, partners, we want to see Iranian behaviour improve. And there is an opportunity, if the leadership in Tehran take it, to actually move from the heightened tensions to a more positive track.
Sorry, just to be really clear, do you actually have a meeting with Mike Pompeo next week?
Yes.
OK, he told Fox News yesterday... He told...
Sorry, I didn't catch that last bit.
He told Fox News yesterday, frankly, the Europeans haven't been as helpful as I wish that they could be. The Brits, the French, the Germans all need to understand that what we did, what the Americans did, saved lives in Europe as well. Have you not been helpful in his view because you actually think that America has overstepped the mark here?
I haven't said that. I understand the position that the Americans found themselves in. I'm sympathetic and also not for a second naive about the role of General Soleimani or the Quds Force or the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and I think I've made that clear. At the same time, we also need to chart a course through these tensions, de-escalate the situation, try and stabilise the situation so that Daesh isn't the main beneficiary of the increasing uncertainty, and as well as wanting to contain the aggressive behaviour of the hardliners in Tehran, of which General Soleimani was a torchbearer, we also want to make sure that there is an alternative positive track through, and that can only happen if Tehran take positive steps to be a responsible member of the international community. But it is an important message that there is a track through this if we can de-escalate the situation. So we're on the same page with our American partners. We'll continue to talk to them, and I look forward to being in Washington and having those conversations with Mike.
I'm interested to find out what you're doing to protect British nationals and British interests in the region amid this clearly very concerning situation. The embassy there, for example, British nationals who may be living in the region. Are we sending more troops or more military support into the Middle East?
Well, I'm not going to comment on the operational matters, but on a whole range of issues, protecting our military missions, protecting our diplomatic missions, not just in Iraq, but across the region. We're taking the necessary measures. You'll have seen in the media reporting, we're making sure that we protect UK shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, and I've revised the travel advice for Iran, for Iraq, and for some of the other countries in the region to make sure that we are always putting the safety of British citizens and British nationals first.
You say that you've revised the safety advice. Does that mean that British nationals in the region are now more at risk?
I think there's been instability for some time. That's no secret, and our travel advisors have been highlighting the risks as they were. But obviously there have been heightened tensions with the recent events, and we want to make sure that we're giving very clear and objective advice, and we're advising against all but essential travel to Iraq and Iran.
Are they more at risk now?
Well, I think obviously as the tensions rise, we want to make sure that we're monitoring the risk very carefully. And we don't want to see anyone put at any undue risk or any risk that we can't feasibly avoid. And so what we're doing, and this is not new, it's the job of government and the FCO, we monitor travel advice right across the world consistently and throughout the year, and we keep it under review. So we're just doing the normal practice to make sure that we're giving British businesses, citizens, as well as protecting our missions, diplomatic and military, all the advice and clarity that they need.
I mean, people in the region, they can be really, really worried about the situation, and many people listening will think you're being quite vague here. You're not talking about what military support you're putting into the region. You won't comment on that. You're not saying if people are more or less at risk. I mean, are emergency evacuation plans in place so that people can get out if they need to?
Look, we never comment on the operational measures that we're taking, but you can rest assured, and people can rest assured, that we're doing everything we can, from the travel advice through protecting our military and diplomatic missions, to keep people as safe as possible. But you're talking about the Middle East here, we're talking about Iraq. Even before recent events, there's instability there. There is a focused effort on countering Daesh and countering terrorist groups and in that country, and indeed across the Middle East. So this is an unstable region. What we want to make sure is that we're providing all the necessary safeguards and precautions, taking the measures, keeping them under review, to do the best we can to mitigate the risk to our people, whether they're ordinary citizens, businesses, or travelling to the region, or indeed our diplomatic posts and military missions that are stationed there.
The Middle East is in the grips of what could be its biggest crisis since the Iraq War. And yet we've heard nothing from the Prime Minister, who's been on holiday in the Caribbean. I mean, does he just think that now that he's won his big majority at the election, he can put his feet up, the hard work's over?
No, that's not right. The Prime Minister is in charge. In fact, I've been in constant contact with him over the Christmas break on a whole range of foreign policy issues. We were in touch on Friday in relation to the situation in Iraq, and the whole government is working very closely together. I spoke to Defence Secretary last night. I talked to the National Security Advisor on Friday, and we're very clear on the strategy and how we're implementing it, and he'll be back in play tomorrow in the UK.
So why hasn't he said anything or come back from holiday a couple of days early?
Well, he's in charge, as I said. We've been in regular contact over the Christmas break, and what really matters here is that the government has got a very clear strategy and message, which is that we want to see de-escalation. We're going to do everything we can to protect UK diplomatic and military missions, and we're going about that business. And I've been hitting the phones hard in relation to all of our international partners, and as you said, I'll be travelling and meeting with our European partners, our American friends. I'll be in Montreal meeting my Canadian opposite number as well, and so the diplomatic effort goes on, and indeed the Prime Minister has been engaged in that as well.
The husband of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, of course, in prison in Iran, has said that he's worried about her safety in the wake of what's happening, and there are reports in the papers today that she's worried about being kept in jail longer as a result. What assurances are you seeking about her safety?
That's one of the issues in relation to Iran that's at the forefront of my mind. We have seen intransigence from the regime in relation to all of our dual nationals. I think they've been subject to appalling treatment, as the dual nationals of other countries have. So that is part of the nefarious behaviour that we've seen from the hardliners in Tehran. They have not complied with their obligations under international law. They're not being responsible members of the international community, and that follows through, and it's a pattern of behaviour which tracks from their flouting of the obligations not to pursue a nuclear weapon. It's clearly relevant to the destabilising activities that General Soleimani was responsible for, but also it relates to their increasingly callous and cold treatment of dual nationals, and that must end immediately. We want to see all our dual nationals brought home as soon as possible, and the truth is that Iran has an opportunity amidst all the heightened tensions. It has a choice to make, and it can continue to flout international law. It can continue to refuse to engage with the diplomatic initiatives that President Macron and President Trump laid out and offered, in which case its economic and political isolation will only grow, or it can take positive steps to rebuild trust, and one of the crucial measures in that regard would be to release our dual nationals and to make sure that they're being treated properly.
OK, now there is another case that I'm quite keen to talk to you about while we have you, and that's about the British teenager in Cyprus who was convicted of apparently lying about being gang raped by 12 Israeli men. Now, it's something that you said you have serious concerns about, so many people will share those concerns listening to this programme, so what are you going to do about it?
Look, it's a terrible case. My feelings and my concerns are for the welfare of that young lady and to make sure that we can see her come home safe and sound to the UK and be able to recover. I have conveyed our concerns about her treatment and the case to my Cypriot opposite number. I did that on Friday. I've also spoken to the young lady's mother to see what more support we can provide to her. So we also need to be careful that we don't do anything which aggravates the situation between now and the date of sentencing, which is on Tuesday. But the concerns that we have and that I have been squarely and firmly and categorically registered with the Cypriot authorities.
I mean, if you look into this and you feel that there has been a miscarriage of justice done on a vulnerable 19-year-old, when we've the reports in the papers about bruising on her body, that she's a potential suicide risk, she's just 19 years old, what options are on the table?
Well, as I've said, I've reached out to the mother of this young lady to see what further support we can do to provide her. We don't control the Cypriot justice system. That's and they're very sensitive in Cyprus about perceived political interference. But there are clear questions around the due process and the fair trial safeguards that have applied in this case. I've raised those with my Cypriot opposite number, and we will continue to talk about that. But ultimately, my first priority, I think the first priority of the family, will be to see this young lady released, come home safe and sound to this country, to allow her to recover. So that's what we're doing, and we obviously need to handle this case very sensitively to make sure we don't do anything counterproductive.
OK, and just finally, we're going to be talking to Lord Berkeley later on the programme, the former Deputy Chair of the Government's review into the high-speed rail link HS2. Is the Government still committed to building HS2?
Yes, the Prime Minister's made it clear, and we've got a review underway. We want to look at the best way to get value for money in relation to that substantial investment. We also want to make sure that we've got the best benefit from it in terms of the connectivity, not just north-south, but in relation to east-west in the northern region. So that's the point of the review. It's underway. I don't want to prejudice the outcome of it, but we look forward to getting that review to make sure that we can really boost connectivity both between the south and the north, but also across the Midlands and the northern towns and cities, to make sure that we can rebalance the economy, boost economic growth, and make sure that we level up the opportunities, economic and otherwise, in this country.